You stand in your kitchen on a quiet Sunday morning, sunlight sliding across the worktop you chose yourself when you bought your flat. The kettle humming, the city stretching below your balcony in Manchester or Birmingham or Croydon. And you feel that quiet, hard-earned pride of ownership, because this was your step onto the ladder, your deposits scraped together, your mortgage approved after years of discipline, your name on the land registry, proof that you made it. You run your hand along the wall, you remember the day you collected the keys, you remember telling your family, "This is mine." Then it happens. A brown envelope lands on your doormat. You tear it open and your stomach drops because the mortgage lender has valued your flat at zero. Zero. No buyer can borrow against it, no estate agent can shift it. Welcome to the unsellable flat crisis of 2026. Before we go any further, subscribe, because this channel is not entertainment, it is armor. And when we expose how the system operates, we protect each other from it. You think you are safe because you pay your service charge on time and you have never missed a mortgage payment. You are not. After Grenfell in 2017, the government tightened fire safety rules and lenders began demanding EWS1 certificates under guidance linked to the Building Safety Act 2022. Without that form, the algorithm flags your property. No certificate, no loan, no buyer. The trap snaps shut. Bankrupt local councils issuing Section 140 notices are desperate. Insurers have hiked premiums, and managing agents pass the bill straight to you under the terms of your lease, governed by the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985 and the Local Government Finance Act 1992 framework that underpins council tax and funding pressures. Frozen thresholds on tax and stagnant wages squeeze you from one side, while service charges climb from the other. This is where the cruelty of the system truly shines. You own the lease, but not the land. The freeholder controls the building. If remediation costs £40,000 per flat, your lease can require you to pay. Developers built through special purpose vehicles that dissolved years ago, leaving no one to chase. The Building Safety Fund moves slowly, excludes certain defects, and lenders such as Halifax, Santander, Barclays and NatWest tighten criteria in response. Estate agents whisper that city centre flats linger for months. You try to sell. Buyers walk away when their broker says the building lacks a compliant EWS1. Your equity freezes in place while interest rates bite. And here is the part no one explains clearly. Even if your building is structurally sound, delay alone can destroy your market. In 2026, uncertainty equals risk, and risk means lenders retreat. The broader housing market may tick along, but your block becomes toxic. You stare at that valuation and realize this is not just about cladding. It is about power. It is about a leasehold system ministers themselves have called outdated, yet reform drifts. And if you think the worst that can happen is you simply wait it out, you have not yet seen how deep this rabbit hole goes. Last time we exposed how your flat can be marked at zero and frozen in place, and now you need to understand how the system actually hunts you down. Because this does not begin with a knock on the door, it begins with data. You imagine a surveyor walking around your block with a clipboard, but that is not how 2026 works. The algorithm flags your property long before a human ever visits. Lenders cross-reference land registry entries with building height databases and past planning permissions logged under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. Insurance renewals spike and that data feeds into risk models. Managing agents upload EWS1 status updates to centralized lender portals. Councils share building control histories. Step 1 feels administrative. Step 2 feels clinical. Step 3 feels invasive. Smart meter data shows occupancy patterns. Open banking affordability checks expose rising service charge outgoings. Credit reference agencies record payment stress. Councils are increasingly experimenting with thermal drone surveys to assess insulation and facade integrity across whole estates. You never see it. You never consent to it in any meaningful way. Yet your building acquires a digital risk profile that lenders treat as gospel. This is where the cruelty of the system truly shines. You are judged not by the bricks you can touch, but by spreadsheets you will never see. Then the damage begins. Picture a widowed father in Leeds who bought a two-bed flat in 2016 for £185,000 with a 90% mortgage. In 2024, his block receives a B2 fire rating. Remediation is estimated at £2.4 million. Divided across 60 flats, that is £40,000 each. The freeholder issues a Section 20 notice under the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985. His service charge jumps from £1,800 a year to £6,500. Insurance premiums triple because the building is deemed high risk. He tries to sell. Two buyers pull out when their lender refuses the mortgage without a completed EWS1 remediation certificate. An estate agent quietly tells him some banks are valuing similar units at £0 for lending purposes. He falls into arrears by 3 months. The managing agent instructs solicitors. Legal costs of £1,200 are added to his account under the lease terms. He disputes the bill at the first-tier tribunal, citing cases such as Wala versus Hounslow LBC, which clarified limits on major works reasonableness, but the process drags for months. Meanwhile, interest on the arrears accrues. The trap snaps shut not in one dramatic moment, but in slow, grinding increments. You think you are safe because the government announced the Building Safety Fund and protections in the Building Safety Act 2022. You are not. Those protections depend on developer pledges, building height thresholds, and complex qualifying lease criteria. If your developer built through a dissolved special purpose vehicle, recovery becomes legally tangled. If your flat exceeds certain value caps, you may not qualify for full relief. Backdating magnifies everything. Some remediation levies are apportioned to historic defects dating back to construction. You did not own the flat in 2008. It does not matter. The lease binds the current holder. Bankrupt local councils facing Section 114 notices push inspection timetables aggressively because liability scares lenders and insurers. Lenders respond by tightening criteria further. Frozen income tax thresholds since 2021 mean your net pay stagnates while your housing costs surge. This is a stealth tax by another name, a wealth grab executed through compliance and risk pricing rather than a budget speech. And here is the myth that comforts you at night. Surely they cannot take your home over service charge disputes. Surely forfeiture is a Victorian relic. Dangerous thinking. Under the Law of Property Act 1925 and reinforced through modern tribunal procedure, persistent arrears can allow a freeholder to seek determination and ultimately forfeiture, though courts treat it as a last resort. Rare does not mean impossible. Even the threat gives managing agents leverage. You think you can simply refuse to pay until it is sorted. You cannot without consequences. In 2026, the system links data, debt and delay into a single pressure machine. Every month you wait, your building's reputation worsens, buyers retreat, and lenders harden their stance. And if you believe that holding on quietly will protect you, the next stage of this crisis will prove just how exposed you truly are. You were told that forfeiture is rare, that protections exist, that common sense will prevail, and that is the myth we now need to dismantle piece by piece, because comfort is the system's favorite weapon. The comforting myth says the Building Safety Act 2022 solved this. It did not solve it for everyone. The Act introduced leaseholder protections, yes, but those protections hinge on qualification criteria that read like fine print in a bank contract. If your building is above 11 meters or 5 stories, different rules apply. If the original developer signed the government's remediation pledge, you may be shielded from certain historical cladding costs. If they did not, the funding route changes. If your flat was worth more than £325,000 in Greater London or £175,000 outside London at a specific valuation date, cost caps shift. Numbers matter, dates matter. Ownership status on 14th February 2022 matters. This is not broad moral protection. It is technical eligibility. Let us make it painfully real. Imagine your flat outside London was valued at £180,000 on the qualifying date, just £5,000 over the threshold. That seemingly small difference can alter your exposure to non-cladding remediation costs. A £30,000 bill might be capped at £10,000 for some leaseholders, but if you fall outside the definition of a qualifying lease, the cap may not apply in the same way. The mathematics of protection is brutal. You think you are inside the shield. The algorithm checks the criteria. You fall outside by inches. The trap snaps shut. Now consider service charges more broadly under the Landlord and Tenant Act, 1985. The law requires that costs be reasonably incurred and that works be of a reasonable standard. Those words sound protective. In practice, you must challenge reasonableness at the first-tier tribunal. That means time, evidence, stress. If your managing agent demands £45,000 for facade remediation and you believe £30,000 would suffice, you carry the burden of challenge. Meanwhile, you must usually pay on account or risk arrears. Arrears trigger administration charges. Administration charges trigger legal letters. Legal letters cite the Law of Property Act, 1925. You think you are safe because you can argue later. You are not safe in the short-term cash flow reality of 2026, when frozen thresholds since 2021 erode your disposable income, and interest rates amplify every missed payment. This is where the cruelty of the system truly shines. It forces you to fund the dispute before you can win it. And if you imagine that lenders will show flexibility once you explain, remember how risk departments operate. The algorithm flags your property as high risk due to unresolved fire safety works. That flag reduces the pool of available mortgages. Fewer lenders mean weaker demand. Weaker demand means lower offers. Lower offers mean negative equity if you stretch. A flat bought for £220,000 with a £198,000 mortgage can quickly become a prison if the market value drops to £190,000 while remediation uncertainty lingers. You cannot sell without injecting cash you do not have. You cannot remortgage without lender approval you cannot obtain. You wait. Waiting feels safe. Waiting feels patient. In this system, waiting compounds damage. But you do not have to be a victim of this system. Stop. Take a breath. The law has boundaries, and when you know them, you regain leverage. Here is your unsellable flat survival guide for 2026, and strategy 1 is what I call the qualification audit offensive. Most leaseholders rely on managing agents to tell them whether they qualify for Building Safety Act protections. That is passive. Instead, you obtain your lease, your land registry title, and the official valuation evidence from the relevant qualifying date. You cross-check height classification, developer status, and remediation scope. You request in writing confirmation of whether the landlord has signed the developer remediation contract and whether your building is registered under the Building Safety Regulator framework established by the Act. You do this formally, referencing your rights to information under Sections 21 and 22 of the Landlord and Tenant Act, 1985, which entitle you to demand summaries of relevant costs and inspect supporting documents. You force clarity onto the record. Why does this matter? Because once qualification is confirmed in writing, attempts to pass prohibited costs to you become legally vulnerable. Tribunal decisions increasingly scrutinize landlords who misapply the Act's protections. When you move from anxious payer to informed challenger, the dynamic shifts. The freeholder knows you understand the statute. The managing agent knows you can escalate. Knowledge does not erase the crisis overnight, but it cracks the aura of inevitability. And in 2026, cracking inevitability is the first step to reclaiming control from a system that depends on your silence. We began with pride and shock, we walked through fear and dread, and now you stand at the point where knowledge becomes leverage. Because strategy 2 is what I call the arrears acceleration trap, and you must avoid it at all costs. The most common mistake leaseholders make in 2026 is emotional defiance. You receive a demand you believe is unjust, and you stop paying entirely. It feels powerful. It feels like protest. It is exactly what escalates the crisis. Under most modern leases, non-payment triggers administration charges, interest clauses, and eventually legal recovery action. The landlord seeks a determination of breach, often through the first-tier tribunal, and once that determination exists, Section 146 of the Law of Property Act, 1925, opens the procedural door to forfeiture. Rare does not mean mythical. You do not hand the system ammunition. Instead, you pay under protest where possible, clearly marked in writing, while pursuing your challenge. That preserves your home while you fight the numbers. Strategy 3 is your data and decision challenge, rooted in the Data Protection Act 2018 and UK GDPR Article 22, which governs automated decision-making. If a lender refuses a mortgage because the algorithm flags your property, you can demand meaningful information about the logic involved in that decision. You can request a human review. Councils and managing agents processing your data must respond to subject access requests within statutory timeframes. This is not abstract theory. Increasingly, property risk assessments rely on aggregated datasets and automated modeling. When you challenge opacity, you expose weaknesses. Transparency shifts bargaining power. Strategy 4 is the collective control pivot, using the right to manage under the Commonhold and Leasehold Reform Act 2002 or collective enfranchisement to purchase the freehold. Yes, it requires coordination. Yes, it requires legal advice. But when qualifying leaseholders assume management, you control contractors, insurance procurement, and the sequencing of works. You strip away layers of opaque managing agent commissions. In buildings where residents have exercised this right, service charge transparency improves and cost scrutiny tightens. The system prefers you fragmented. Unity disrupts revenue streams. Strategy 5 is the late intervention shield for those already deep in the crisis. If remediation bills have landed and arrears loom, you explore structured payment plans, challenge the reasonableness of costs under Section 19 of the Landlord and Tenant Act 1985, and if necessary, seek specialist advice before any forfeiture stage advances. Courts examine proportionality. They examine conduct. They examine whether statutory consultation requirements under Section 20 were properly followed. Landlords who cut corners weaken their own position. You document everything. You respond on time. You do not disappear. This entire saga is a moral failure layered over legal complexity. Ordinary people bought homes in good faith. Developers used special purpose vehicles. Regulations tightened after tragedy. Bankrupt local councils strain under Section 140 notices. Insurers price risk aggressively. Lenders retreat behind models, and you, the leaseholder, sit at the junction where every institutional pressure converges. This is where the cruelty of the system truly shines. It punishes normal ownership as if it were recklessness. It weaponizes frozen thresholds and stagnant wages into a stealth tax by default. But the system only wins if you comply in ignorance. When you audit your qualification, when you avoid the arrears acceleration trap, when you demand data transparency, when you organize collectively, you move from isolated debtor to informed stakeholder. Memorize this. Never ignore a demand, never assume protection without written proof. Never let an algorithm be the final word. Keep your lease accessible, keep your correspondence documented. If you are facing this right now, share your experience in the comments so others can learn from it, because collective intelligence is our early warning system in 2026. Subscribe not for me, but for the homeowner who has not yet opened that brown envelope on their doormat. Stay strong, know the law, and never sign a demand you do not understand. I will see you in the next one.